Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to just imagine for a second waking up one morning and something is terribly, deeply wrong. Your body feels like lead. Your head is absolutely throbbing. Your stomach is twisting in knots. You're freezing. Your teeth are chattering, even though the sun is already coming up. You try to stand, but your legs just buckle. They literally don't feel strong enough to hold your own weight. In this explainer, we're going to explore one of the most profound and honestly terrifying moments in human history, the story of the very first person to ever get sick. And we'll look at how that single, baffling mystery ended up changing the entire trajectory of our species.
You know, today, if you feel awful, it's no big deal. You check your temperature, maybe you Google your symptoms, and you go back to bed. But for our distant ancestors, this happened millions of times over without a single one of those comforts. There were no doctors, no hospitals, no medicine cabinets. But the most terrifying part of all this? Nobody even knew what sickness actually was. That first person who became sick probably had absolutely zero idea that anything had even entered their body. They just knew they went to sleep perfectly fine and woke up feeling like they were dying. They were facing this invisible enemy that they didn't even have a word for yet.
Section 1. Blaming the invisible. The dawn of disease wasn't just a fleeting moment of discomfort for early humans. It was a completely mind-bending mystery. Imagine living in a world where you only understand what you can physically see. You see the river, you see the fire. If a hunter falls and breaks a bone or gets clawed by an animal, the reason is obvious, right? They fell. They were attacked. Simple. But an invisible threat? A person can eat the exact same food as everyone else, sleep right beside perfectly healthy people, look totally normal in the morning, and by nightfall, they are just burning up with a fever. There's no visible wound, no obvious attacker, literally nothing you can point a spear at.
So, how can something hurt you when you can't even see it? Well, human brains are deeply, deeply uncomfortable with invisible enemies. When we can't see the cause of something, we invent explanations to fill that void. Without a microscope, early humans just logically blamed what made sense to them at the time. They blamed spirits. They thought they were cursed. They blamed supernatural forces, bad weather, divine punishment, the whole shebang. And from a modern perspective, sure, that might sound like silly superstition. But think about it. If you were there, with zero knowledge of germ theory, what else could you possibly conclude?
Moving on to part 2. Sickness built the squad.
This invisible serial killer didn't just wipe us out, though. It actually forced humanity to evolve and cooperate in completely unprecedented ways. Because, you see, sickness doesn't only happen to the person who is sick, it happens to the entire community. When someone goes down, everything has to change. They have to stop hunting. Somebody else has to bring them food. Someone has to sit by them and protect them from predators while they're weak. Somebody has to step up and care for their children. Suddenly, human survival abruptly shifted. It wasn't just about individual strength or being the fastest runner anymore. It was about relying on the squad.
And this brings us to a really powerful realization from our source material. Archaeologists have actually found ancient bones that show serious injuries which had healed over time. Think about what that actually means in reality. A broken femur in prehistoric times? That should be a guaranteed death sentence. The fact that the bone healed means that for weeks, maybe even months, that person couldn't walk, couldn't hunt, couldn't defend themselves. And yet, they lived. They survived because somebody carried their water, somebody shared their food. Empathy, quite literally, became our greatest survival tool.
Part 3. The first medicine.
Now, humans are natural problem solvers. We weren't just going to sit around waiting to be picked off by some invisible curse. The real urgency of humanity's counterattack was driven by our most vulnerable members, our children. A child is incredibly vulnerable to infection and can become dangerously dehydrated in just a matter of hours. For an ancient group, losing a child wasn't just emotionally devastating, it threatened the very existence and the future of the entire community. This gave mothers, fathers, and elders an overwhelmingly powerful reason to figure out what treatments worked and what didn't. Pure desperation drove discovery.
And so we get the birth of the scientific method, literally playing out in the dirt. Prehistoric science was this wild, high-stakes game of trial and error. Step 1, try a random plant. Step 2, see if the sick person improves. Step 3, remember the result. Just imagine the bravery and, honestly, the cost of this. You give someone a plant to ease their stomach pain. If they get better, awesome. You teach it to the next generation. If it poisons them and they get worse, well, you have to remember that too. Every single discovery, every foundational block of traditional medicine came with a massive, massive price tag.
Which leads us to part 4, finding the microscopic enemy. After thousands and thousands of generations of this trial and error, we saw a massive acceleration in human ingenuity. We started with that raw observation around the campfire. Then we moved into understanding anatomy. Then we started developing more sophisticated medicines. But the real game changer, the moment that literally splits human medical history in half, is right at the end of that timeline, the invention of the microscope.
For the first time ever, the enemy finally had a face. Humans could peer through a lens and see an entire world that had been hiding in plain sight since the very dawn of time. We could actually see tiny organisms. We could see cells. We could see bacteria. That terrifying mystery of the curse, the bad weather, the evil spirits, it was finally replaced by something tangible. Once we could physically see the microscopic world, modern medicine as we know it today was born.
And finally, Part 5, the final mystery. As we wrap up this explainer, I want us to go all the way back full circle to that anonymous first sick human whose terrifying experience kicked off this massive evolutionary journey. We are never going to know their name, but they leave us with such an incredible thing to think about. Next time you get a fever, pop a pill, and just lay on the couch binging your favorite shows, I want you to remember our ancestors. They didn't have antibiotics, they didn't have hospitals. They only knew that sometimes the body just suddenly turns against you, and they had absolutely no idea why. We only survived because we cared for each other long enough to finally learn to look for the enemy exactly where nobody had ever thought to look before.